how to create a daily financial tracker here in Excel with a couple of different and interesting features, such as, for example, whenever you type in here the date, the month is going to automatically change for you based on the date that you input before. And here in the type, in the description, in the type you're going to have either expenses or incomes, and the list in the description changes based on the type to match the type option that we selected before. So as income, you're going to have salary, side hustle, others. And if you change expenses, you're going to have a different type of description. So you're going to learn how to create it here with Excel. Another thing that is very interesting is the dashboard itself, where we can visualize the data with more preciseness. And we can make a different analysis too, such as see each one of the months and the incomes, the expenses, and the total balance for each one of the months that we have in the cash flow. In other words, basically we have here an addition with all the values, but following a certain criteria, that is income and the month, January, February, and on, or expenses and the months, and on and on. So let's take a look here on how can we create it step by step from scratch. Let's go. Now with a new blank workbook, the first thing that I want to start with is creating here the title for my sheet. So let's say cash flow, or you can use actually a different name if you think it suits better with the thing that you want to create here. Now I want to input here the headers that I'm going to use to create the table where we're going to input the data that corresponds to the incomes and outcomes. So let's say in the cell B3, I want to start with the date, and then I'm going to hit tab, because instead of using the cursor to select a specific cell or the next column, if you hit tab, it's easier. You just need to press one button, okay? Just tab, date, and then month to extract only the month from a date that we inputted, for example. And the month is going to be very important in order to create the dashboard and to make analysis. Now the third information here is going to be, let's say, the type. It can be either income or expense. The next column I want to use description, and then the value of the thing that you expand or have as income, and then a note. If it's something important, then you want to input here a note. As the date, let's start now with the date and fill in with a couple of informations just to see how it's gonna work. The date, I want to input here January 1st of 2024, and then I'm gonna press enter. Okay, so this is how we're gonna input the date. It's perfectly already. Now with the month, I want to extract the month from the date that I typed in before. So as I have it here, January 1st of 2024, I have basically three different informations: the month, the day, and the year. But I want to use only the month. And to do it, there is a function in Excel called equal sign text function. Let me double click here, 1, 2. The text function basically can only have two different arguments. The first one is the value, where you can select the date. Just click over the cell here on the left, and then comma. Now we can input here a format to the text. So let's say, as we have the complete date, the month, the day, and the year, I want to use only the month. So I can open quotations here, and then MMM 3 times the letter M, close quotations, and then close parentheses. I can press enter, and I'm done. Whenever I change here the date, the month is going to be automatically updated for me, only displaying the month that corresponds to the current date that is here to the left. So let's say I'm going to change this date. I can use March 2nd of 2030. Let's say enter. And as you guys can see here, the month is going to be automatically changed for me whenever the date changes. As the type, I'm going to have only two different options, or it can be income, or it can be expenses, let's say. And in order to make it faster, and instead of manually typing anytime the same thing, we can create here a data validation, or basically a list where you can click in the cell and select one of those two options, income or expenses. So let me click here in the first cell, and then I can go to data, and here to the right I have data tools, and this little icon here is where I'm going to click data validation. Here, instead of using allow any value, I'm going to change and use list. And as the list, I can have any type of different options, such as, for example, income, and then comma. My second type of option here is going to be expense. And if you have a third option, a fourth option, and on, you can keep continues to add the options here, and then use comma, the third one, comma, the fourth one, and on, okay? So you basically need to separate those options with the comma. Let me press here, okay? And we've done so. Here, I'm gonna have two different types of options. It can be income or expense. If I have, let's say, an income, I'm gonna have a different type of description here. It can be income, maybe salary or wage, or a side hustle, side job, or whatever. And if I have, let's say, expenses, it can be an expense for groceries, rent, car, or heat, gas, water, pet, and on, okay? So we have a lot of different options. And in order to create this dynamically, let's say I select here incomes. In the description, instead of manually typing the options, I'm gonna have a list too. So I want to create here also a list with the options, but the options need to match with the type, income or expenses. And in order to make that, let's go here to the bottom of the spreadsheet, and I'm gonna click here in this plus sign, new sheet, in order to add another sheet. The first one, I can right click here and click rename, and we can again type here cash flow, enter. And the second one, right click, rename, I can type in lists, enter. And as I have the lists here, I can basically, in the first cell, create the title that corresponds to lists. And maybe here in the cell B3, I can type in income. Income, I think it's good. And in the cell D3, I'm gonna input here expense. Okay, now you need to list all the incomes and expenses that you have. So let's say as income, it's just an example, okay? I have salary or wage. You can use whatever you want to use. Side hustle or side job is the same thing. And others. As expenses, just a couple of examples here. It can be rent, it can be car insurance or car fuel or car maintenance or on and on. But I'm just gonna leave car, and then I have groceries, or I'm gonna type in food because it's easier to type in. And also I have heat, gas, water, and pet, and others, let's say, okay? So a lot of different options. This is the list that we create. And in order to match the type with the list that we can have in the cash flow, we need to transform these lists into a table. Of course, there's a lot of different ways to match those lists. This is a way that I like to do the most, okay? So transform first both of the lists that we have into a table. So let me select here everything, and then I go to insert, table, and it's very important to make sure you check this option. My table has headers, yes. So let me check here, and then click OK. Now we're gonna do basically the same thing for the second list, insert, table. My table has headers, of course, and then OK. I can also change the colors. So let's say income, I want to change the table design and use a green one like this. And as the expenses, I want to use the table design as the orange one like this. And we can also click here in the cell, in the column B, for example, or more specific, in between the column B and C, click, hold, and drag to the right to make sure we can increase the size of the column B. I'm going to do the same thing here for the column D, but let's match the size of both columns, B and D. Let me click in the column B, and now I'm going to press and hold the Control key and also select here the column D. Now in between the column D and E, I'm going to click, hold, and drag to the right. That way I make sure I can match both sides of both columns, okay? As the first column here, let me make it a little smaller, such as 2 in the width, or it's going to be 1.86, okay? Now let's come back here to the cash flow, and now we can create here the lists based on the type. And to do it, we're going to use, again, a different function here that is equal sign, the indirect function, this function right here. This function can help us to make the list match with the type. But before we do it, let me come back here to the list. And here we need to change the name of both tables, the first one and the second one. Basically, we just need to select everything in the first table and go to table design, and here to the left, table name. Within this bar, instead of using table 1, I'm going to use income, and then click out the selection. The second table has a name such as, let's say, expense. And with those changes done, now we have as the name of the first table income and the second one expense. We can easily create the data validation here in the cash flow to match with the type. So take a look here. Let me click in data, and then data tools data validation. As the allow any value, I want to use list, and in the source I want to input here equal sign in direct function, and then open parentheses, and I just need to select this cell right here where I have expenses. Just click here, and yeah, something very important here, we need to get rid of this $sign, because both $signs, okay, because I don't want to lock the cell in the same position. I don't want to lock the reference. So let me read it off here, this $sign, or to make it much easier, instead of select the cell itself, we can input the name of the cell here manually. That is, expense is the cell D4. So here within the parentheses, D4, and then close parentheses, and then I'm gonna press OK. Now whenever I have here, this can be either expenses or income, the description is gonna change. It's gonna change based on the type. Income, I'm gonna have a list, and as the expense, I'm gonna have another type of list. Easy, so easy as that. Okay, so let's say expense car, and as the value $100. And to make it the value, the number in the correct format, I can click in the cell and go to the home tab and select here the $sign to format as dollar or all other different currencies that you want to use here. As the note, I can input here anything. So let's say, let me change here. Instead of using car, I want to use food. And as the note, you can type in here a more specific description, such as if you wish to, okay, you don't need to do the note. It's just a column that you can or not fill in. So let's say I bought a snack, blah, 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 and etc. Okay, so just something to remember you why you expand or receive the value that you input here. Now the last step that I want to create here in the cash flow is make sure I'm gonna make this first column a little bit smaller, such as 1.86, and all those other columns we also gonna change the size. But before we do it, let's transform the data that we have here into a table. So we're gonna select everything, click insert table, make sure you select this option, my table has headers, click OK, and you can also change the colors, table design, and choose here a different one. I'm gonna stick with this one right here. The date, I'm gonna increase a little bit, the month, like this, type, maybe a little bit more, description, I'm gonna make it the width equal to 20, and both here, I'm gonna increase a little bit too, like this. I think it's good. Now, just to the final touch here, I'm gonna select basically everything and go to home and centralize and align in the middle everything, just to make it evenly. Now we're done. Whenever you insert now a new row with new informations, January 2nd of 2024, look at what's gonna happen. Enter. The month is gonna be automatically update here for you with the function that we did before. Also, the data validation is gonna be here. And also the description, the data validation that we have here, also is gonna be waiting for you here. Because whenever we create a table here in Excel, whenever you add new rows, new informations, all the functions and formulas is gonna be added automatically for you. Now it's time to create the dashboard itself. And to create the dashboard, I can click here in this plus sign to add a new sheet. Let me click in the sheet, click, hold, and drag to the right, just to change here the order and organize it better. Let me right click now and rename. This is gonna be my dashboard. And of course here the title is gonna be also dashboard. And I'm gonna make sure I change this column size to 1.86. Okay. Now in the cell B3, or before we start with dashboard, I think there is some important informations to be visualized in the dashboard, such as, let's say, how much income you have in each one of the months, how much expenses you have, and things like that, okay? Just basic and simple things. Because with this cash flow, of course, we can input all the data that you're gonna have, but we can't see pretty much anything. We can't make analysis, but with the dashboard, we can. So in the dashboard, we can start with month, and then I'm gonna have January, February, and on. But instead of manually typing all the months of the year, I can stick with January, click here in the down right corner of the cell, click, hold, and drag down to make sure each cell continues the sequence for me, like this, until December. And now I'm gonna have here income, and also expense, and maybe the balance, that is the difference between the income and expenses, or the income minus the expenses. We can create it now. So balance equals sign income minus the expense. Enter. Now, as the income, I want to add up all those values that corresponds to the income type, and whenever you have here many different types of incomes, many different type of expenses, the dashboard is gonna show you here only the information that corresponds to the income, and then only the information that corresponds to the expenses. So basically here we're gonna have a summary, okay, for all the incomes and all the expenses for each one of the months. As the income, I want to use for both, okay, income and expenses, I want to use the sumif function, because the sumif function can sum not everything that I have, but just if this thing match with the criteria. And here we're gonna have two different criteria. The first one can be the income, that is because it can be or income or expenses. So the first criteria is income, and the second criteria can be the month. So we have basically two conditions: income, the type, and the month. Equal sign sumifs function. Sumifs. Let me double click here, 1, 2. And as the sum range, I want to go back here to the cash flow and select the values. Don't need to select the headers, okay? Just select the values. Or if you want to, you can do it. It doesn't matter. So let's stick with the second option, select everything with the header. And then Jopa. Now, as you can see here through the formula bar, the sumif function is asking me about the criteria range, the first one. The first one is can be either the month or the type. So let's stick with the month. Select here everything with the headers. And then Jopa. Now, the sumif is asking me about the first criteria. And as we selected here the month as the first range, we need to match those informations and select that way the first criteria as the month. So let's come back here to the dashboard and select the month, January. Okay, simple as that. Now let me press here, Jopa. And now my second criteria range can be here in the cash flow, the type, select everything with the headers, and then Jopa. And the second criteria that I'm gonna use here is gonna be in the dashboard, and the income. You can basically click in the income or manually type in income within the formula. If you choose the first option, that is to click in the cell that corresponds to the income, you need to make sure you lock this reference, because if you click, hold, and drag down the function, all the range is gonna follow along, okay? So it's gonna be moved down. And if the income range or the income selection move it down, we're gonna lose the reference of our criteria. So we need to make sure we can lock the reference of the income just right here. It can't move down. And to do it, let me select here everything in this last range that I selected, and I'm gonna press F4 key to append the $sign before the letter C and before the number 3. That way we're gonna make sure we can lock the reference. Now, just that, okay? I can press enter, and that's it. So my income for January is equal to $500. And yeah, it's correct. And as you're gonna see later, because I'm gonna fill in here with a couple of different informations, the dashboard is gonna match perfectly both of criteria that we have, income and the month. Now let's click, hold, and drag down this value right here to make sure all the rows contain the same function, and we basically done. Let's double click here, 1, 2, and as you guys can see, it's perfectly correct. To do the expenses, we basically gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna just change one little detail here. That is, instead of using income, we're gonna use expenses. Think about that. We can click here in the preview cell, double click, select basically everything, Control C to paste, and then within the expenses cell, 1, 2, Control V to paste, copy and paste. But instead of using the income, we're gonna use expenses. Simple as that. Enter. Now I'm gonna click, hold, and drag down to make sure we have the same function for all the rows, and the balance is I'm gonna do the same thing. Now let me select all those values and change here in the Home tab everything to the $sign S $, okay, like this. I can also click in the cell in the column C, D, and E, in between one column and another. Click, hold, and drag to the right to make sure we can increase those size. Now I'm gonna select here everything, and then I go to Home, Centralize, and then input borders, The headers, I'm gonna make it a little bit different, such as bold, and also the colors I can change later. Let's select here the months first and change bold and use a different color, such as this black one. And the font, I'm gonna use white. For the month, I'm gonna basically do the same thing here. Income, I want to use a green color and a white text. Expenses, I want to use a white text and a red color. And the balance, I want to use a white text and a blue color, like this. Now to make sure we can improve a little bit more here in the dashboard, I can select everything here in the income and use Home tab, conditional formatting, and use color scales. I can use this option right here, green, white color scale. Whenever you have here, the greatest value that you're gonna have is gonna be highlighted with the green color. And the lowest one is gonna not be highlighted. So we're gonna basically here have a grade of these colors, okay, I scale. So let's say I'm gonna manually type in a couple of different numbers. And as you guys can see, those colors are gonna match the value. For expenses, I'm gonna do something similar. Home tab, conditional formatting, color scales, and I'm gonna use now a head one, this one, head white. And for the balance, maybe we can use something similar, conditional formatting, color scales. Maybe I can use the first one. Okay, I think this one is good. Now let me do something here. I'm gonna input a couple of informations here just to check how the dashboard is gonna look like. Okay, I just fill in here my cash flow with a couple of different values. And as you can see, the dashboard is working pretty well. But maybe I can make some changes here. In the balance, I don't like that much of this conditional formatting, so I'm gonna select everything here. Then I'm gonna click Home tab, conditional formatting, clear rules from selected cells. And again, I'm gonna use a different one, Home tab, conditional formatting, and maybe I can click here, highlight cell rules, and everything that is greater than 0, let's say, is because it's positive. So I want to highlight with a green fill. Okay, and everything that is Home tab, conditional formatting, less than 0 is because it's negative. So I want to highlight with head. Okay, and yeah, that's it. Now it's much better to see and visualize the data. As the income, I have here a couple of different incomes, and you can see the one that has here the strongest color, let's say, has the largest value. And the same thing here applies to the expenses. Now the last touch that we can have here is in this last row, have a total, let's say, equal sign some function, double click, 1, 2, and we're gonna have an addition of the income, expenses, and balance. Enter. Let me click, hold, and drag to the right, and we're done. Now we can see everything that we have as incomes throughout all those months, and also everything that we have as the expenses, and the final balance right here. That is basically the addition of all those values, 1,700. So this is basically the value that was left in my bank account throughout all those months in this year. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and this is how we can create a very simple but useful spreadsheet in Excel to help us to track our incomes and outcomes, our expenses. If you have any questions or any suggestions to next videos, let me know, comment down below, and I see you tomorrow. As every day has a new video, I see you there.